Okay, welcome everyone. It's 1:47 p.m. At this time, I'll call to order the meeting of the Conservation Authority on Wednesday, March 25th. Before I go to a land acknowledgement, I'd just like to welcome the newest member to the Board of Directors, Caleb Hall, representing the town of South Bruce Peninsula. Welcome, Member Hall, and I'd just like to pass the microphone over to you at this time if there's anything you'd like to provide the committee.
Well, thanks for welcoming me on, and I know that there's challenges ahead, and hopefully I can contribute in your advocacy.
You are probably somewhat correct with the challenges ahead, so we'll see if we can move mountains. So this time, I'd like to note that we acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the three fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis, whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all, as treaty people, live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. Item 2 is disclosure of pecuniary interest. Looking around the room, I'll go to Vice Chair Shaw.
So I do want to disclose a pecuniary interest in the item 6.2a in the consent agenda. Our farm received a stewardship grant, so I won't be voting on that.
Okay, so we will pull that item and vote on it separately. Not seeing any other hands at this time. Item 3 is call for additional agenda items. Are there any additional items? Not seeing any. Item 4, approval of the minutes of February. And these would be somewhat amended as we did lose quorum at one time on the item receipts and expenses for January, hence it coming back forward. We did briefly lose quorum for that item before retaining quorum. So those minutes just as amended, noting that. I'll go to you, Member Farmer.
Thank you. Second time is the charm. I would just request a correction on page 5 of the agenda under the minutes for the discussion of the volunteer policy. Objective should read subjective.
Okay, thank you, John. And before I go any further, I got thinking about inviting Member Hall, and I neglected to actually ask for a mover and look to pass the motion that the Board of Directors approve the agenda of March 25th, 2026. And I see Member Dubik and seconded by Member Mackey on that motion. All those in favor? And that is carried. Did you have anything to add, Member Farmer? I just see your hand in the air.
Just trying to move.
Okay, thank you. So we are back to the approval of the minutes. Any other questions from committee regarding those minutes? Looking for a mover. After the minutes. Oh, I already explained. We lost quorum and those minutes or the receipts come forward again. So look for a mover of the minutes from February. So moved by Member Farmer, seconded by Member Urig. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Item 5 is business out of the minutes. This time we have none. So item 6 is the consent agenda. And if I could just extract item 6.2a, we'll vote on it separate as that is the item where an interest has been noted. Are there any questions to item 6.2a, the receipts and expenses of January? Not seeing any. Member Farmer, over to you.
If I may, for the January expenses through the chair, I'm just curious. I note that there was a small amount of money returned for unused grant funds. Just wondering about whether that's a regular thing or if, yeah, how often we return grant funding.
I'll go to CAO.
Thank you, Member Farmer. It is it's unusual for us to not use up all the grant funding, but when that does happen, typically these grants will say that if you haven't used the monies within that time frame that's allotted, that the surplus is returned.
And anything further? Not seeing any, so just looking for a mover and seconder for receipt of that item. Member Winters has so moved, seconded by Member Day. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. So we will return to the consent agenda. Are there any items within the consent agenda that members would like to vote on separately? Member Farmer, I'll go to your hands in here.
Sorry, that was residual.
Okay, thank you. So in consideration of the consent agenda items listed in the March 25th, 2026 agenda, the Board of Directors receives all the items accepting receipts and expenses for January. We've already approved that. Do I have a mover? Vice Chair Shaw, seconded by Member Dubik, and all those in favor. And that is carried. Thank you. At this time, it's kind of annually, we get to welcome Mike to the board to present regarding the investment package. So thank you very much for your time coming to visit us this afternoon, Mike, and I'll pass the microphone over to you. Welcome.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Nice to see many of you again. Pleasure to be here to give you an update on the investment portfolio. Looking forward to seeing your new facility next year, hopefully when we meet again. I was telling Allison we recently did a renovation in our office in Kitchener-Waterloo, and I do have to say, moving into a new facility with everything new and shiny, it really does re-energize you. So I hope you all feel the same way when you move into your new place in June. Yes, next slide, please. Just a brief reminder of the team that supports myself. I have a colleague, Fong, who joined me 2 or 3 years ago. You haven't met him, but I'm sure at some point in the future I'll be bringing him up to introduce you to him, but he is certainly part of my team. And then I have my 2 assistants, Laura and Sauble. Allison mainly interacts with one or both of those individuals from time to time, but they do support me in many of the things that we do on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. Just wanted to go through the agenda for today. So wanted to give you, I always like to start with a review of the investment parameters for the portfolio that we're managing on your behalf. Then we have the actual performance of the portfolio, asset allocation, kind of a look back at last year, just briefly, kind of some of the big picture items that we're in the midst of right now, and an outlook and recommendations and time for questions afterwards. So moving to the parameters. Hopefully you can all read this okay, but we've had this portfolio in place for quite some time, and the broad strokes of the parameters have essentially remained intact, although we've had to adjust some things over the last few years in preparation of your admin building renovation, where we've changed the mix a little bit. But just some of these numbers are, I guess, a week old, but I looked today, they're not too different than what you see on the screen at $1.922 million. I think I was looking at it today, it was 1.911. So we're down about $10,000 in the last week. So basically flat on the year, but the portfolio is holding up well in what I would say is a pretty fluid situation with lots of things happening in the markets. Get a reminder of what our primary objectives are for this portfolio. Obviously, capital preservation is key for most clients. not losing what you have, but we're also trying to protect the purchasing power of this portfolio for inflation and also to support your organization for, ongoing projects, i.e. the admin building or anything else that you have on the go. So that is a secondary component after capital preservation. We always establish an investment parameter, like an investment profile for a portfolio. So we've defined this strategy as balanced. And if you think of balanced, meaning you've kind of got half your money in safety, half your money in growth. We've adjusted that. I've made a notation that in late 2004, we shifted some funds to a money market fund in preparation of this admin building renovation. So those funds are still there, ready for your use. And I understand you're slowly drawing down some of the loan facility. But at some point in the coming months, you'll probably need to dip into this cash. So it's there, it's ready to go when it's required. With a balanced investment approach, we would normally define that as having a moderate risk profile. So, not too conservative, not too aggressive, somewhere in the middle again. But we always like to point out worst case scenario. If we have really difficult markets, a balanced portfolio could experience a drawdown of 5 to 10% in a 12-month period. I think there's probably only 1 or 2 times where this portfolio may have experienced that, COVID being one, maybe last year during the tariff negotiations with the US, but things recovered fairly quickly. So it's not a permanent decline, but you can experience that kind of decline in the short term if we have some really unique circumstances. Expected return for this strategy is 5 to 6% net of fees. I say over a rolling 5-year period. We're not too far off that mark. Investment time horizon continues to be long term. So again, these are things that we like to reaffirm every year. And liquidity constraints, we've just noted that we've got money sitting aside, ready to go when it's required. Okay, next slide, please. So this is the actual performance as of March 16th. I've highlighted a few things noteworthy that I wanted to point out. Again, the 1-year return, basically from last March to this March, was just shy of 8%, 7.94. These are after fees and expenses. And considering we have a fairly sizable position in cash, I would like to say there's been a bit of a cash drag on the performance. So that was done tactically for setting aside money, but to still generate high single-digit returns, even with a large cash position, highlights a couple things. Many of the things in the portfolio were working last year. We had very strong returns from equity markets, and bond markets performed relatively well as well. So what you did have invested did well, and kind of on a 1-year basis, kind of exceeded what our target rate of return is. If you go to the inception, we're just shy of the 5% annualized return, 4.88 or 4.8. And again, with the cash drag over the last couple of years, I think, had this portfolio been fully invested, I'm confident we would have been in that, 5 to 6% range. But understanding that we needed to shift some funds to cash, I don't think it's to be expected that, we're slightly below that 5% target. And like I said, 2026 is off to a bit of a choppy year, a strong first couple of months, but the last month has been difficult. So we're basically flat on the year. Okay. I'll just shift to asset allocation. So again, this is as of last week. Significant portion of the portfolio is sitting in cash, money market. So it's safe. It's paying about 2.5%. So, it's doing what it needs to do. But you do have good diversification in the portfolio across geographic areas, different types of fixed income, a few alternative strategies. So I think the portfolio is positioned very resiliently to be able to withstand these kind of bouts of volatility. And once we get some clarity on what you need and when you need it, maybe that cash position will eventually be used or can be reallocated back into the portfolio. Okay. But yeah, all in all, I think you can take some comfort that the portfolio has held up well against a pretty choppy period this year. Moving to the next slide, market performance. I don't like to spend a lot of time looking back because what's done is done. But, what we've got is, I just wanted to highlight that, market performance was quite strong last year. We've got some key return indices here. I'll just quickly go down the left-hand side. You've got your bond universe, which is basically an amalgamation of different types of bonds, corporate, provincial, government bonds. Last year wasn't a great year for the bond industry as a whole, only up 2.64%. But if you look at the corporate bonds, where we do have a large overweight, corporate bonds did very well, kind of in that 4.5% range. So being overweight corporates is where we're currently positioned. And it served you well last year. I think it will serve you well going forward. You can see the TSX performance, kind of middle of the page, just shy of 32%. US markets in Canadian dollar terms was just shy of 12. And you've got some European and Asian and emerging market performance. I think what I want to point out here is for a long period of time, we had outperformance coming from the US, and we started to see that broaden out to other markets. So Canada, Europe, emerging markets all outperformed the US last year. Some of that was kind of maybe in response to tariff policy, where investors decided to place their money elsewhere, but those economies also started to perform better. There was some very attractive opportunities. So we see that theme continuing, where maybe the US won't be as dominant, but it's still a very important market, and you've got strong presence there as well. So just a quick look back at last year. Flipping to the next slide. Lots going on. It seems like at least the last couple of years when I come in April, there seems to be a lot going on in the world. Last year was tariff policy. This year happens to be Middle East tensions. So these four main components are moving all over the place right now. At the beginning of the year, we thought inflation, while it has been sticky and higher than where central banks want it to be, we thought it was fairly contained. I guess that's off the table right now. It all depends on how long oil stays high and how high it goes. But obviously, high oil prices can have pressure on inflation and flow into interest rate policy as well. So I can't really give you a clear indication as to where that's going to land, although it's all over the place right now. It'll depend on the duration of how high oil prices go and how long they stay there. I think it's fair to say, even if this conflict were to end soon, there's been meaningful, production disruption, facilities taken offline, supplies. So it's not going to come back in a quick manner. I think we're in for a period of higher oil prices. But sub $100, I think the economy can do okay. North of that, and certainly 120, 130, you get into concerns around recessionary outlooks. So hopefully we don't get there, but that would be, the level of that could come on the table where global recession starts to look like it's a possibility. Interest rates, again, we thought the US Federal Reserve was going to be cutting interest rates at the beginning of the year. We thought Canada was going to be on hold. With inflationary pressures, that does bring into the conversation the likelihood or the possibility of rates going up again. I think they'll probably wait and see how this all plays out before raising rates. High oil prices in itself is a bit of a tax on the economy and can slow it down. So that might put the brakes on the economy for central banks. But I don't think we're going to get interest rate cuts anytime soon unless we had a real significant recession and they needed to try to stimulate the economy. So hopefully we just have a holding situation where rates are where they are. I guess for you guys, maybe in your loan facility, I think you're locked in, or so this might not really mean much to you guys because you've got secured rate for some time. So that's good. Economic growth coming into the year was pretty strong. Like we really liked the backdrop of what we saw. And I think we can, if this isn't prolonged, we can get through this and kind of resume a growth trajectory. But again, it will really depend on how long this conflict lasts. So we still have a constructive outlook. That is still our base case scenario, that this won't be a long drawn out affair, and that we will still have global economic growth, which should be supportive of markets. But again, this is very fluid and it could change. So for now, that's our positioning. So yeah, as far as our market expectations, we were expecting higher markets at the beginning of the year, and that still is our base case scenario at this point in time. Last page is just a little bit of, as a firm, what we're suggesting, how clients be positioned. Now, this isn't fully reflected in your strategy because of your unique circumstances where we wanted to have, a lower equity weighting and more money sitting in cash. So, our firm position would be underweight cash, but so this isn't going to line up with you because your circumstances have dictated otherwise. But we would normally be underweight cash, underweight fixed income, and overweight equities and overweight alternatives. You've still got a meaningful allocation to equities. you have some of the alternative components that I'd like to see in the portfolio, but there are some other strategies I would like to eventually incorporate. But I think once I get some clarity around how much of the cash you're going to need and when you're going to need it, I'll have that conversation with Tim and Alison about including some of the other strategies that currently aren't in the infrastructure bucket that I would like to see your portfolio have. One thing about alternatives is they're illiquid, meaning they're not as saleable on a day-to-day basis. Most of your other investments are publicly traded. You can get in and out of them on a daily basis. Some of our alternative strategies you can only get in and out of on a quarterly basis. So I don't want to go into a strategy where I can't get liquidity if you needed it. So that's why I've stayed away from incorporating all the alternative strategies. But there would be some that I would like to recommend maybe once we get through the admin building needs, and then we have a clearer picture what things look like for you as an organization for the next few years. So that was my updates. I'm happy to take some questions if people have them.
Thank you very much for the update this afternoon, Mike. I will recognize Member Day with the first question for you.
Thank you. I have two questions. They're unrelated, so I don't mind taking a turn between questions if that's desirable to the board. The first question is looking at the global economy and those trends and considering the purpose of conservation authorities and the environmental ethics and practice behind this organization. Can you speak at all to how the global economy is changing regarding renewable and non-renewable energy and how that might relate to, and perhaps how that might relate to our portfolio?
Sorry, I'll just have you go back to the microphone.
There we go. One of the strategies we're using in the portfolio is our responsible investing strategy, where it was chosen because it has elements that kind of align with the values of this organization. So, we're looking for companies that have exhibits, very high ratings and social, governance, their social responsibility factors. And we have our own kind of internal screening mechanism that we use to screen companies that rate high in these areas. So we are reflecting some of our investment strategy. What I would say it aligns with this organization's focus on the environment. There is a huge focus on renewables. We're still seeing, not so much in the US, but certainly in Europe, where you're still seeing, renewable energy as a reliable source, or where governments are investing. So we do have an infrastructure fund that invests heavily in renewables, which I think would align well. One of the strategies I'd like to include, but have been, I guess I said, reluctant based on the needs of the organization right now, because it's an illiquid strategy. But we are seeing a lot of opportunities in renewable energy type initiatives that we are investing in as a firm, and we have a fund that does that. So outside of the US, I still think renewables are a very attractive area. As an organization, we are continuing to invest in them, and it would be a strategy that I'd like to incorporate. But I think at the same time, when you see what's going on in the world, we're still heavily reliant on oil as a key commodity. But you are seeing shifts into natural gas, and you're seeing nuclear come back into the foray as far as reliable energy. So those are cleaner sources of renewables that we're seeing a lot of countries invest in, and that bodes well for Canada and other countries that have those kind of commodities. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but I would say renewables is an area that we're still have a very favorable outlook. And I think I would like to get that strategy into the portfolio at some point, because I think it does align well with the organization's values.
Thank you. I've been asking that question periodically for about 20 years now, and it seems like every time I ask it, there's a stronger answer. So I very much appreciate the progress in the field. My second question is completely unrelated. in my other job as an educator, I have seen a very quick and dramatic impact of artificial intelligence on my employment practices and teaching. And I was curious if AI is being used in your industry and office and business, and if so, if there are things we should be aware of regarding how that might impact decision making.
I think the financial services industry in particular is one that's going to be very influenced. I think every industry is going to be impacted by AI. Certainly, I can tell you within our organization, they are adopting AI rapidly into our toolbox. So certainly in the financial services industry, it's becoming more relevant. It's more like a tool. I'm sure there'll be areas that are maybe impacted from a headcount perspective, but I think the bank's approach is more to be a productivity tool that sits beside you or on your shoulder through Microsoft Copilot, for example, is being rolled out in the organization. But yeah, the bank has written a tremendous amount of, I would say, like noteworthy articles on artificial intelligence. I could certainly forward some additional material because it is a very topical. I think it's not going away, and I think it's something that has to be learned how to be adopted as opposed to avoided. So I'm happy to send some additional information that the bank has published on artificial intelligence and the industries that are, most likely impacted, or the ones that are adopting early, things like that. I'm not an expert in that, but I do know as an organization, it's been a source of investment ideas. And obviously, we're investing in companies that are partaking in this build out of AI. And so those ideas are kind of reflected in some of the equities that we own. But it's kind of evolving, and I think it's still early days, but I'm happy to send you some more information.
If I might just wrap up, I appreciate your answer, and I'd be curious to see that information if it should become available. It has an interesting synchronicity in terms of our previous meeting looking at water use and tying back to that environmental consideration for how the data centers operate. So it has an impact in so many ways for conservation authorities and everybody else.
Thank you for that. Member Urick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fact that your hair isn't shocking white gives me a little bit of relief that in your industry. My question is more umbrella as opposed to the nuts and bolts of this. In terms of the recent meetings, and I guess I know we'll get into this later, but this is directly proportional regarding the amalgamation. I don't presume you've heard any government regulatory bodies reaching out to you saying, oh, by the way, all these amalgamations are happening. Each one's going to have their own portfolio. Has that been mentioned in any capacity at all? What that amalgamation plan is going to look like? Because obviously we're with you, and who knows what the other CAs are going to be within our group. So what's that going to look like as well when that gets amalgamated between all the bodies? So I just don't know whether that's ever has come up. I don't remember in meetings I was, but if that's come up more recently.
Okay, thanks for the question. Likely I'll go to CAO Lanthe for a response to that.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. The short answer, Member Urick, is no. So that'll be something that has to be considered as part of the larger consolidation if that's the path that we continue down. But at this point, very few details have been provided at all.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Member Dewitt.
Thank you, Chair. And hi, Mike. Good to see you again. I do want to thank Councillor or Member Day for bringing the AI question up. I was a little curious about that as well, so thank you for that. Just one other question about just a technical matter here. You've mentioned that we do have a small exposure to alternatives. I do see on our little donut asset allocation, there's an other category. Is that the alternative? So maybe if you could just provide a little bit more context about what alternative exposure we do have. Thank you.
No, that small allocation to other is not your alternatives. The alternative strategies that you own is our commercial mortgage strategy. and our real asset fund, which has some exposure to real estate and a little bit of the infrastructure strategy. And it's included in some of primarily the Canadian equity. The real asset fund is under Canadian equities, and the mortgage strategy would be under fixed income, one of the buckets there. So those are the two strategies you have currently: commercial mortgage and the real asset fund, which is a combination of real estate and infrastructure projects. The infrastructure project I was alluding to earlier is a standalone strategy where we can greater emphasize kind of the renewable aspect that strategy has, if that's something that the organization wants to put a little more emphasis on. We can bypass the real estate strategy and just invest in the infrastructure. So I didn't total up the weighting, but I would, off the top of my head, I would expect it to be somewhere, probably 7 to 8% of the portfolio has exposure to what I would define as alternatives.
Thanks for the questions. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon, Mike, and the review of the last 3 months, last year, and also the informed perspective on what challenges your industry and our portfolio might face in 2026. So thank you very much. Safe travels. Oh, sure thing. We are very much appreciative of the interest and certainly excited with how it's progressing. So we're into item 8, which is business items, and we do have a few business items this afternoon before us. Perhaps if I have the indulgence of committee, if I can just actually move item 8D, the building update, forward, that might be favorable to Mike. Would there be any objections from committee? I'm seeing agreement. So if I could move to 8D, the building update at this time. I see Ian coming to the podium, so welcome this afternoon, Ian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quick. This won't be a huge update. We're hoping to get the board out to see the building here coming up in April. So it's not far away. I just came from there, and every single time I go there, even if it's just been a couple of days, there is quite a bit more that's been done. And if you're there now, you can actually see the stone being put on the outside, and it's going up very quickly. So it's going very well. Some of these pictures, this is from I think it was just last week. So there is some stone on the other side, but at this point now, a lot of that area is getting covered in stone in the front and everything. So I just put in a few pictures because I know that's what everybody really wants to see on it. But this view in particular is going to be very nice. This is the sort of the showcase piece from the architects that they always talked about, trying to keep that view out over our lands there. And of course, scaffolding and such in the way at this point, but once they're complete there, then looks very good. And then the posts and all of that is going to be stained the same color, and just it blends in very nice. Yeah, if you view in from that front lobby, all those pictures were of the front lobby area, to where the administration desk is. And lots of construction stuff in the way, but that is all actually cleaned up as of today, and they're finishing things up in a lot of areas. A view of the upper floor, just some of the office areas as you're entering. So again, nice and bright, nice and open. You can still see through to the windows in a lot of the different sides of the building. So it hasn't been closed off as much as maybe there's some concerns. And nice and bright, and then the beautiful view of the cupola that got approved, and Want to say a big thank you to the board for approving that because it looks unbelievable. Just being able to have that light coming in, this is, a view from the planning office. Again, not closing off the area. And then you can see those are their windows are in up on the cupola. Almost everything is done on it. And then I don't know if you remember the big ball lights that we had all around there that have now been removed and the area cleaned up. But and then just sort of a closer view of the cupola. So then the only other pieces outside is the soffitting to be put on the underside up there. But the ceiling of that was put in to try and match essentially the rest of the building we have as well. So it looks, the pictures don't do it justice. That's the only thing I'll say. Can't wait to have everybody in. We did want to give a bit of an update on two things, the budget and the timelines. We haven't had to come very often to present much because we've been able to stay on track pretty well. So the original contingency budget was 244,000, and following the cupola and the roof approval, that contingency went down to 96,000 left. At the time, we stated we were confident we'd be able to keep it under, although we never know. But at this point, there's been 11 change orders issued for 23 items. Some of those were items that we requested. Some of them were things that just needed to be revised, make sure that everything's going to look good. So the additional costs from those changes was 75,000, but we were also able to find $33,000 of reduction, so credits to that as well. So at this point, we're sitting with a contingency remaining of 54,000. A couple other small things have come up, which we'll probably be getting into, but again, we're still pretty confident at this point that we should be able to stay within that current contingency budget. So that is great to be able to say at this point. Just a couple of the change order examples. And this is where I was saying some of them were requests by us. And some of them were actually recommendations or comments from the contractor, where they would open the walls up because they have to, and then they'd look and see there's no insulation at all below those windows on the main floor, for instance. So we discussed what we could do to, because that was something we looked into during the design phase, and the price came in very high for that. But once it's there and we can look at it and we can discuss the scope and everybody knows exactly what they're getting into, then you get the better bang for the buck on it, essentially. And we did add insulation on the upper floor under all those windows. And then there was also a couple areas in the lower level where, again, they opened it up. They're there when it's raining. There was a couple spots where there was some cracks and a little bit of water, very little, but we decided to go in and get them to dig up the foundation outside, waterproof it where those areas were, to make sure we don't have any issues after we're done. Of course, while they're in there and doing that, we may as well put some more insulation on those walls as well, and make sure it, again, get as much as we can from an energy perspective. There was some changes to that concrete vault, things you don't know until you start taking it apart. So asbestos abatement, and then a few things on the design that were essentially difficult to figure out on the plans and in that front lobby area, and a few changes to the roof just to meet some ESA requirements. And then the credits, there was a couple of doors that were going to be expensive to replace, and we kind of looked at it and said, there's another door that looks exactly the same right beside. So do we really need to do that? So it was those sort of, once you know what the price of everything, you can kind of look at it and say, is this really what we want to do? So and then there was a few allowances that weren't needed as well. Looking at the timeline, early this year, we asked for an update on the schedule, where things were at. So early in the year, the contractor put together a revised timeline schedule. Because at that point, they knew there's things like the lift. There's several subcontractors that they have that when are they going to be able to deliver the items? If you remember back when we were tendering last year, there was some questions on whether there was going to be some delays in some items due to tariffs, that sort of thing. So it was all sort of take it all, look at it, make sure you give us a date that's going to work. And we got to remember, we asked them to do that cupola work. They did rush that in to get it done before winter because they didn't want to be up there during the snow. And that definitely took 2 to 3 weeks. And then there was some of these additional items, installation, waterproof. And they came back and basically said they would be in a position to finish by May 25th. So which is pushing it back about a month or a little more. We felt that was very reasonable. And so we have been planning to move back that last week of May. We will get the keys essentially planned for May 25th. So we would have a week to get a few things done. And then May 31st is the date planned to move everything back in. And I think that is all I have at this point. Any questions?
Thank you very much for the presentation and the update this afternoon, Ian. Member Mackey, then Vice Chair Shaw next.
Thank you, Chair Greg, and thank you very much for the presentation. Ian, you have kept the bill committee apprised of what's been going on throughout this process. So, you know, on behalf of the committee, you know, certainly we appreciate everything that you've done. And you and Tim took the committee for a tour 3 or 4 weeks ago, and there's certainly been progress since that time. But I know that we were impressed when we went through, and you had certainly told us about some of the change orders, and you being involved almost like a project manager for this, I think has saved the Conservation Authority a lot of money. So my hat goes off to you for, you know, all the work that you've done in regards to this, and look forward to it. And I'm glad, you know, even though we were skeptical about the cupola at the beginning, it looks great. And what you're absolutely right, it was the right decision that was made. So thank you for prodding us along through that process. And I think we'll have a great admin office when we're all done. So thanks.
Vice Chair Shaw.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to echo the comments. You said the pictures don't do justice, but these pictures are quite impressive, and I just wanted to say a big thanks to you and the committee. I think this looks absolutely fabulous, and it really strikes me how, you know, some of the additions, particularly upstairs with the cupola, the extra light, the adding in the offices, like the finishes really set off the features that were already there in the building with the fireplace and the wood ceiling. Like that to me, that really stands out so much more now. And those were some features of the building that I think were really unique and beautiful and certainly a great tribute to the work of the organization. So I just wanted to say how great I think this looks, and I can't wait to see it in person. And I'm excited to see the finished product. So thank you.
Member Maxwell, and then Member Yurt.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you for the presentation and the good work. I just have a question on the additional insulation and waterproofing. Was this to meet the existing building code, or was for best practice?
So there was 2 things. One, we found once it was exposed, we found cracks that were in the foundation, and after a particularly heavy downpour, there was a bit of water that came in. So the contractor alerted us to this. Just to again, it's been nice going every couple of weeks. So they showed me the area, showed sort of the area with small puddle and that, but definitely something we want addressed. So we looked at the best way to address that, which was to go outside the building, dig it up, basically blue skin the wall and down over the footing. So anything that's coming to there will get away. So that solved that. But again, while we also have the wall open, we were looking, and it's a concrete foundation wall. One of the items that had been discussed early was insulating those exact walls. So the areas we had open that were going to be exposed, I think a lot of the cost was going to be with the drywall, having to drywall everything if you're opening up everything and having to redo it. So these were areas that were already exposed, and said yes, we would like to put in a certain amount of insulation that's not going to have additional costs. Do what we can where we can, basically. But because of the timing and being able to again see what we're dealing with, they can price it better. It worked out well. So it wasn't a building code thing. It was more just seeing the issues that we have, and then honestly taking advantage of a situation where we can get something we wanted in the first place, but at significantly less than what was projected at the time. It wasn't cost of the contract, it was estimates, but yeah.
Thank you, Member Yurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the report, Ian, and thanks for the great work. Looks great. The only question I had was, so May 31st, we actually have a board meeting on May 27th. Staff's going to be a little busy that week. I'm just wondering if that creates any additional headaches, or whether that creates a problem. Not that it's easy to move a meeting a week forward or back, but is that seem doable for staff? We could be packing that week.
Probably wait and see approach. Maybe that'll be the meeting that we have to have in the pavilion. Weather dependent. I'll go to Ian for further there.
So what the plan is, essentially, again, we're going to have a moving company in to be moving all of our goods and everything. So because it's a lot less than it was moving here, because half of our stuff's in the barn. So we didn't bring anything extra that we didn't really need. And so I don't think it's going to be too cumbersome. It is something that we're going to look into, and we have formed a moving committee to just go over all these things to try and foresee as much as we possibly can. But I don't think it's going to be as bad as it was packing up and throwing out and trying to go through 50 years worth of stuff. That was an undertaking, and that was months in the works. But I don't think it should be as bad. But
okay, not seeing any. Oh, I do see some more questions. Member Dubik and then Member Day.
Thank you so much. So yeah, building looks stunning. So congratulations. Really excited to have our first meeting in there. So just a question about the asbestos. In our municipalities going through a hazardous materials review of our buildings right now, so it's kind of top of mind. So is the building asbestos free now, or maybe if you can just give me a little bit of context on that. Thank you.
There was very little asbestos in our building. There was a very little amount in some of the tiles in the kitchen, a couple areas. There was some of that was known, and so that there's a majority of what was there we knew about and had included. But there was a pipe that we believed was insulated with asbestos, but the pipe itself was asbestos as well, and that. So it wasn't a huge extra. But it was just that pipe had to be immediately removed and replaced just while they could. And it was one of the main sewage lines and everything, so it had to be done very quickly. So yes, as far as we're aware, and we've been through everything pretty much, there's no asbestos. It was all removed as part of this renovation.
Member Day.
Thank you. In regards to Member Urig's question, I have empathy for moving. We renovated the school relatively recently and had to move back into the biology labs the afternoon before school started. So I know these things can happen in quite quick timelines sometimes. I would just request that we find, if the meeting date is changing, sooner rather than later would be highly beneficial for those of us perhaps with more than one job.
Yeah, we'll bear that in mind. I don't think we'll probably anticipate moving the date. It would just be location that's suitable. So I'm just Not seeing any further questions. Great comments, great presentation, great photos this afternoon, Ian. Thank you very much for sharing that, and certainly great comments from committee. We're all ecstatic and probably only half as much as staff are to get moved back in there. So thank you very much this afternoon. So we will proceed or regress back to item 8.1A, which is CAA changes. And I will go to the CAO Lanthe at this time to speak to that report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the ongoing saga of these changes that we're looking at, I'll provide the board with a brief overview of where we've come from to date and the information that I have at this point, which is not a lot expanded from the last time we've talked, but things are happening more quickly now. So as you're aware, on October 31st last fall, the province announced a plan to consolidate Ontario's 36 conservation authorities into 7. Ours would be the Lake Huron, this Huron Superior region, which included Lake Simcoe Region CA across Georgian Bay, and then down Lake Huron as far as the Sauble Bayfield, which goes down about as far as Port Frank's Grand Bend area. Also including Lakehead Conservation Authority, which is in Thunder Bay on Lake Superior. On November 6th, Bill 68 came out, and that announced the creation of the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency. That went through first and second readings very quickly, and then within a couple of weeks had received third reading and royal assent, I think by the end of November. So very, very quick. Also at the beginning of November, November 7th, the province posted on the Environmental Registry of Ontario the proposal to consolidate the conservation authorities and solicited comment on that from the general public. 14,000 comments were received through the ERO posting, either directly through the online submission platform, or according to that website now, over 8,000 of those comments were received via email. So to provide some perspective on this, a lot of ERO postings will get hundreds of comments. My understanding is the Greenbelt issue got about 3,000 or 4,000 comments. So 14,000 comments is orders of magnitude higher than what is typical, which is good. So online, once a decision has been made, and on March 10th of 2026, the province announced that they do plan to keep pushing forward. So, and I'll get into that in a second, but once a decision is made, the comments that were received by the ERO are available on that website. In this instance, about 4,800 of the comments are available for review, and the other 8,000 plus comments are not because they were received by email, so they're not readily available. But of those 48 comments that are available to review, it's our understanding that about 97.5% of those objected to this consolidation. So what we gathered from that is that what we're hearing is that the province is saying that they've listened to the comments from the public. And as far as I can tell from where I'm sitting, it appears that only their rhetoric has changed. So we're hearing that they're taking a slow and measured approach in response to the fact that this is being rushed. However, the deadline hasn't changed. They're saying that they're listening to rural local communities about the concerns that we have versus being merged with large urban centers. But they're still moving forward with their plans to merge us with large urban centers. So GSCA's concerns remain the same. Our rural communities will still be underrepresented in these large regions. This will impact accountability. It will impact transparency. It will impact our community's ability to connect with the Conservation Authority, and it will impact your municipality's representation and voice. So what we do know in terms of the changes is that Lakehead region, Thunder Bay, is no longer part of the region that we're in. We will now be the Lake Huron Region Conservation Authority. It's still too large. So the province has said that these will still be municipal corporations. They will still be represented by population, so rep by pop on a board. However, participating municipalities will no longer be lower tier. So your municipalities will no longer be representing, will no longer be participating on conservation authority boards, and rather that role will move to the upper tiers and single tier municipalities. So in Grey Sauble's watershed, that would be Grey County and Bruce County. And when I think about the perspective of where Grey and Bruce counties sit geographically related to, say, Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority and ourselves, we align pretty consistently where Grey and Bruce counties are side by side, east and west of each other, and Saugeen Valley and Grey Sauble align north and south of each other, but largely we cover those two counties. Currently, we have 11 members on our board representing our 8-member municipalities, and Saugeen has 15 members on their board representing their municipality. I think we could reasonably expect to have 1 member from Bruce County and 1 member from Grey County. And so when I think about Grey Sauble's watershed, those 2 members might be within our existing watershed area, or hypothetically, 1 could be from Kincardine and 1 could be from Southgate, and there's no representation in the northern part of our watershed. I don't know that, but it's not a big leap to get there. So what we're hearing from the province is that the boards will be appointed, you'll have the members appointed from those upper tiers, and those upper tiers will be apportioned the cost. It's unclear what that looks like in terms of how that trickles down to lower tiers. So it's unclear whether the upper tiers are now just expected to find that money. So in terms of Grey Sauble, our levy is about $2 million a year. So our Grey and Bruce counties now just required to come up with another $1 million each, plus the monies for other CAs. And now your municipalities have surpluses, or does it find another way to trickle down? We don't have answers to that yet. What we do know is that the province has said there will be they're expecting 15 to 20 board members per board. A rough estimate of the number of upper tiers and single tiers within our jurisdiction would suggest there are 14 or 15 upper and single tiers rather within our jurisdiction. So that strengthens the thought that Bruce County and Grey County would each get 1 representative, and the areas around Lake Simcoe with the city of Barrie, city of Newmarket, those areas would have more members because the population there is substantially higher and it's growing substantially faster. To address the local concern, the province has stated that they're going to create watershed councils to address this. We haven't seen any clarity on what these are, how they'll function, how they're formed, and what teeth they may have in terms of bringing a voice to the table. To use an old idiom, I mean, it really, really feels like we're at this point trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, where instead of saying, you know, this solution is not in fact the solution that we need and is not the best mechanism of solving the problems that we see, but rather absolutely sticking to their guns at all costs and making up awkward and odd ways to solve the concerns that they've heard. So as an example, the hierarchy is moving from right now what is essentially a conservation authority municipal partnership, where our municipalities pay a part of the budget and you sit on the board and make the decisions of what the authority does, to a hierarchy structure that looks like a lower tier watershed council, upper tier board of directors, Ontario Provincial Conservation Authority agency, and the province. So going from a 2-partner partnership to a 6-tiered hierarchy. And again, we don't understand the rationale. We understand from the announcement that's been made that the province is proposing to allocate $3 million a year, first to OPCA, the Ontario Provincial Conservation Agency, to help them with the transition costs, and then on an ongoing basis from that point on to help the conservation authorities that need more help. We like that the province is investing more money. I think that's a good thing. It is important to recognize, though, the thing that's not being said is that in 2019, the province cut funding to conservation authorities by $3.5 million. And when inflation's factored in, that's 4.3 million in today's dollars. So although they're proposing to come to the table with some money, it wasn't enough then. I'm suggesting it's not enough now either. So as the transition takes place, we expect a budget bill to come out tomorrow, probably. It would be in line with previous legislative changes that these changes to the Conservation Authorities Act are embedded in that budget bill that we could see as early as tomorrow. We understand that the current boards are going to go until, well, they have to go until February, but that changes are going to start taking place following the municipal elections in October. And following those elections, once the county or upper tier councils start sitting, those councils will appoint the appropriate members to the new board, and those new boards will take effect February 2027, as that's the end of the transition period and the point at which the new consolidated regions would start to operate. To help through the transition period, it's intended that there'll be a transition committee that will consist of the CAOs from each existing conservation authority. So within our region, there would be 6 of us, as well as 1 board member from each of the existing conservation authorities to make up 12. And that additionally, the OPCA would be appointing a project executive to run this process. And that project executive would become the inaugural CAO of the new regional conservation authority following the transition. So we've prepared a briefing document that we sent to all of your municipal councils to update you on this. We prepared a media release that covered some of the things that I've just talked about. And we did have pretty good uptake on that, as well as other media outlets reaching out to us to talk. And something I learned about recently that unfortunately I haven't watched yet because it happened while we were sitting in this room, but Ontario Nature, as well as the Watershed Conservation Coalition, it was holding a media event at Queen's Park today at 1 o'clock to urge the government to back off from this plan to consolidate conservation authorities because it does seem ill-informed. And it, as I said before, it seems like they're struggling or striving to find a problem to meet the solution that they've put before that's all. So hopefully good things come of that. But this week, a lot of information we do expect to receive a lot of information this week, and we'll be moving rapidly to address that and respond to that as that happens. So back to you, Mr. Chair, for any questions or comments the board may have.
Thank you, and well outlined, but I do presume there'll be a few questions regarding this report. So I'll go to Councillor Farmer online first.
Thank you. Through the chair, I appreciate highlighting. I know that some of our previous conversations named a fear of a duplication in oversight with the new provincial authority, OPCA. I don't have a lot of cause in life to say triplication, but the idea that we're also adding the watershed councils as well as that updated regional piece and OPCA makes me really worried about funding and the financial implications for our communities. As a first question, do we currently know where the money funding OPCA so far has come from? And do we know whether that will also be downloaded or how that piece is working?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Currently, the minister has stated that $20 million has been provided so far to OPCA to presumably help them get off the ground. We know very little about that, and certainly we haven't seen that money. So I think that is strictly for OPCA. Additionally, that $3 million that's been announced it's unclear whether that's intended to continue to fund OPCA into the future or not. It didn't sound like it, but that hasn't been made clear. But what I can say is that in the original proposal and in the changes to the Conservation Authorities Act related to OPCA that are already in effect, OPCA does have the ability to apportion its costs to conservation authorities. And as I mentioned when I visited each of your councils, conservation authorities currently have the ability to apportion our municipal partners. So by extension, essentially OPCA has the legislative ability to apportion costs to the municipal partners.
Thank you. I appreciate too that this is all evolving. Are we aware of any efforts currently to get access to all of the remaining ERO submissions by any organizations?
I do believe that that the watershed coalition that I spoke of is trying to get a hold of those. We are not, because we don't, as Great Sauble, we don't have the capacity to review 14,000 records. But we have encouraged some of our partners that they may want to do that if this is something they're interested in, and it's something that they don't want to see happen. That it would be good to have a clear picture painted. And if indeed the entirety of the 14,000 comments reflect a similar story to what that 4,700, 4,800 subset suggests, I think it would be good for the province to be honest and clear about that. If they want to tell us, if they want to consolidate the conservation authorities, they shouldn't do it under the guise of saying that they're doing what they heard in the comments, if that's not in fact what they heard in the comments.
Thank you. And a final question at the leave of the chair. Are we aware of any comments on this issue from any of our local MPPs to date?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I am not.
Okay, thanks for those comments. I'll go to member Urick next, and then member Day, then member Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Tim, for the ongoing frustrating reports you have to do. Two things. One, at the end of your report, you did say, let you know if you'd like to attend a future council meeting to discuss the matter. I mean, I'll speak for me and say I'd like to see you come and make a presentation. I will at the next council meeting. I always give a report from this anyway. I will do that, but I would really like to see you actually, because I still think we need to try and leverage the municipalities themselves, because they're the ones that are paying. They're the ones that are going to be underrepresented, and I think they really need to be a voice in all this. So I think you making presentations to this regard is a good idea. My other question is, when one of the last points that was on your key points was the transition to be implemented by a steering committee consisting of the existing CIOs and one board member. Can you just once again just give a little bit more transparency on what that looks like to your knowledge now? And I know you are very limited in what they're even telling you right now. But you did sort of say something in there about that becomes kind of the de facto board that kind of looks after this transition. Do you have any expectations from that or any directionality on that at this point?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I don't have any information beyond what I've shared.
And member Day next.
I predict you may have a similar answer to this question. You had some very reasonable hypotheses regarding what might happen to the board and decreased representation from the municipalities. Is there any information with which predictions can be made regarding what happens to buildings, or perhaps our most valuable resource of the people who work for conservation authorities, particularly those who are at senior levels and perhaps would be most affected by that previously mentioned transformational opportunity to return to different frontline work?
Through you, Mr. Chair. again, we don't have a lot of information. What we do know is that the province has said that there should be no job losses, and that that through this initial phase, no offices will close. So I do suspect that those discussions will happen in more detail with the transition committee to determine how those transitions take place. But certainly from Grace Sauble's perspective, our goal is to keep our office operating and to keep all of our team doing what they're doing right now.
Member Mackey next.
Thank you, Chair Greg, and thanks, Tim, for the additional information. You talked about the composition of the new board after the next municipal election involving a member from each county. How does the member from each county correspond with the population? Like you talked about, you know, the Simcoe area, Newmarket, with the heavy population may dominate the board. But I'm looking at how many counties would there be from, you know, Grey Bruce South, you know, in southwestern Ontario, as opposed to the number of counties over to the east. I mean, I guess, where is land mass and population going to come in to the composition of the board? Maybe is the best way to ask the question. Thanks.
So I don't have perfect answers to these questions, but the brief presentation that we were provided by the ministry stated that composition will continue to be representation by population. So in the current model, what that looks like is that there are tiers of population at which point you would get another member. So if your municipality currently has less than 10,000 population in the watershed, you get one member on. This is the current situation. If you have between 10,000 and one shy of 100,000, you get two members on the board, which is why we have a board with 11 members. And then once you go over 100,000, you get three members on the board. And I've never bothered to learn what the tiers are beyond that because of where we operate. In the new scenario, I don't know what those tiers will look like, because I presume they would change, because the less than 10,000 would be irrelevant for any upper tier, I would think. But there will be tiers like that. And given the number of upper tiers and single tiers within the region that we will exist within because of its size, I don't think we'll be at 15 members because, like I said, I think there are 15 upper and single tiers. I'd be surprised if we're even at 20 members, because those municipalities, the apportionment side is also still going to be the same formula models that we use today, which is the modified current value assessment. So if the assessed value of property in, say, Newmarket, I'm randomly picking a place and I'm going to be making up numbers, but let's say that's an order of magnitude higher than Bruce County, that needs to be appropriately reflected for those municipalities. They're going to care that they're paying for this huge region, and they're going to want that appropriate representation on the board. And so they're going to want the province to put something into place that allows for their population to adequately place those members in the board. Now, there's a lot of speculation on our part with this, because the province has not been forthcoming with that information to date.
Vice Chair Shaw, then Member Dewitt.
Thank you, through the chair. And I guess this isn't a question, but I just wanted to comment on something Tim mentioned regarding the funding mechanism and this moving to the upper tier, and something that jumped out in the presentation that I sat in, and that was the province is asking that the 2027 budget for conservation authorities be done and approved by December 31st, 2026. So if you just give that some thought, within a municipal election and potential for our membership here changing in October, we might be looking at having to do our budget here in August and September, but that budget is built on apportioning to municipalities at the lower tier, and then come February, this is going to move to the upper tier. So it is very in my mind, that the timing of that, I don't even see how that would function or work. So I just wanted to share that with folks here because it is quite possible that we'll be starting our budget quite a bit earlier than we typically would, so that that's wrapped up before the municipal election, and like where those funds gonna come from in a future state, and how that's going to work is going to be really clunky, I think. So I just wanted to share that with folks as well.
Just before I go to member Dubik, if I could just, on that subject, it's sitting with me. I think one of the reasons they haven't done a reassessment provincially is it's a gateway for municipalities who don't reset tax rates and don't do it properly to perhaps extract extra dollars from the taxpayer. This is very similar where our local municipalities would lose that levy responsibility and then disguise additional spending mechanisms in place of actually recognizing the absence of that levy requirement to their taxpayers. So at the county level here, we could be looking at a 3.5% levy increase as we absorb that new tax responsibility, and it would be done on the pretense that the lower tier municipalities may offset it. However, in actuality, I think there's a sincere risk across the province that that might not happen, because it would be easy to expend those funds elsewhere in your budget and then blame the provincial government for the tax increase. But it's another concern I have with how this levy change is going to occur. So I'll go to member Dubik, then member Maxwell.
Thank you. So my questions have been asked, but everything's still very fuzzy. So just a quick comment. Given the province has stated like we're a year away from full implementation. The fact that right now we have such a lack of clarity, a lack of details, and little financing, little funding, for a very transformative organizational and a governance change, like this is just a poor recipe.
Appreciate those comments. Member Maxwell.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to know, anytime during the conversations on all these mergers, was there any mention that the province might entertain the idea of folding all the conservation authorities back into the MNR instead of it being on the being funded by the local municipalities?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Conservation authorities were never MNR. So we were a partnership originally between funding partnership between municipalities and the province, but built by municipalities for municipalities. And the legislation was an enabling piece of legislation to allow the municipalities to do that. So I think what's being proposed here is the closest version that we've ever seen of the province exerting strong oversight of conservation authorities through MECP. So we're no longer with MNR, but with MECP.
Okay, any further questions to this report? Lots of good questions. I know member Yurik's thinking of one. I'll just give you one moment to come up with it and finish your line of thought. I know I certainly am concerned that here at Grey Sauble, we have about 29,000 acres. And as we had Mike here speaking to our portfolio earlier, a lack of clarity about how that our assets locally could be protected in a greater watershed where demands may differ dramatically. Tim, two questions. It does sound to me like this $3 million, it sounds more like an expenditure in preparing for new name badges with new logos, as opposed to investments in conservation authorities. Am I interpreting that correctly as to how it's best being presented so far?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, I don't know.
And my second question is, we have our own fees for development here. How would we compare to fees in Nottawasaga and Simcoe? Might it be extremely punitive to the local residents here with our development permit and fee schedule in place to have a subsequent fee schedule umbrella or layered on top of our local residents?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have an answer to that, but I'm going to look to our manager of environmental planning, Mac Lewis, to see if Mac does.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have comparable fee schedules to neighboring CAs in terms of the amount. They might differ here and there on different structures and how they're organized, but I think what we do see though is particularly like Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, where they have really complex levels of development, their fees go up exponentially with that. We don't necessarily have the same structure that way. So for example, they charge, if I'm recalling correctly in their fee schedule, they might charge per cubic meter of fill material within a regulated area where we don't have that structure. So projects that involve a lot of fill material, they go up exponentially based on that level of development. So they're different. I don't know though what that fee structure will look like at the end of the day. Yeah, it's one of the many unknowns about this.
Okay. Thanks for that response. That might certainly be something that we wish to communicate through our lower tier municipalities, a potential impact there on our local residents, particularly our rural comparative to the larger urban centers that we would be consumed by. Did you have a follow-up question, Member Urick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Less question, more of a comment. Just want to say thanks, Vice Chair Shaw, for that budget comment. I hadn't heard that one before. Thank you. Lovely. I just wanted to commend staff for actually proposing the multi-year budget that we did last time, because that actually will help us be ahead of that curve a little bit. I wonder how many CAs we won't be. So that was a very good decision last year to do that.
Okay, not seeing any further questions. So there is, Member Maxwell, last word.
Thank you very much. A question, will the municipalities have any choice on which conservation authority they may wish to belong to?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it's because you'll fall within a watershed jurisdiction. So all of the municipalities within our current conservation authority would become part of the Lake Huron Region Conservation Authority. And I think all of you would, I'm not 100% sure about Grey Highlands, would fall 100% within would fall 100% within the boundaries of that one regional conservation authority. Because like Simcoe Region, Nottawasaga Valley, Grey, Sauble, Saugeen Valley, Maitland Valley, and the Sauble Bayfield would all consolidate into one regional conservation authority.
So the reason I asked that is because the town of Blue Mountains is less agricultural than say Meaford right now currently. So we probably would have more alignment the way they're thinking with Nottawasaga. So I just wondering how that was going to work out.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Nottawasaga would cease to exist, as would Grey Sauble. We would just be one large regional conservation authority.
Okay, this time I'm going to entertain a mover, whereas the government of the province of Ontario has announced its proposal to proceed with the consolidation of Ontario's 36 conservation authorities into 9 regional conservation authorities, and whereas the legislation to enable this is expected imminently, that the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors receive this report as information. Do I have a mover? Moved by Member Winters, seconded by Member Mackey. And was there any further questions to the report? Member York?
Sorry, I didn't want to throw in one more. I just wondered, Tim, since Thunder Bay is not in there anymore, before we had a number of the municipalities that would be included. Do we now know the number of municipalities that'll be projected for this new body?
In terms of the lower tiers, you mean? I haven't recounted them, but I'm gonna hazard a reasonable guess of around 70.
Okay. Thank you very much for the questions. This time I'll call the question on the floor. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tim, for those responses and the work of staff over a busy last couple of weeks, once again, responding to the concerns. I see member Mackey wondering about a break. I'm watching the clock. How about we entertain one more item while it's closely associated to what the last report was, which is back to Tim regarding the Township of Huron Kinloss resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll try to keep this one relatively high level. We were going to have a special meeting of the board on March 11th to address this because we did feel that it was very important to head this off as early as possible. But the province came out with an announcement on March 10th that made it almost moot. So what's being proposed, or what was proposed by the Township of Huron Kinloss, is a version of a Lake Huron Region Conservation Authority that is more rural in nature was the intent. So the intent is largely that it wouldn't encompass Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority and Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. However, what they did propose was that it would capture a portion of Grey Sauble Conservation Authority's watershed, just the Sauble River watershed, and not capture any of the remaining parts of our current jurisdiction. And it would do the same thing to Lake St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, and would also include North Bruce Peninsula, which is not currently under a conservation authority at all. So there was no consultation on this. And so essentially, at a staff level, and I think at a board level, this should be reflected as well, is we're greatly opposed to this proposal for the following reasons. They're detailed in more detail in the report, but all very high level. Obviously, it fragments Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, our jurisdiction. We have one group of staff that looks after this entire area. There's no practical way, especially with our staff size, that you could sever the watershed like that and expect to retain any corporate knowledge. One side would get it and the other side would not, as well as it would leave out odd parts of Georgian Bluffs and odd parts of South Bruce Peninsula that don't fall within that Sauble River watershed and would be awkwardly left with the remainder of Grey Sauble. It mischaracterizes rural landscapes, so it's clear that in the decision from council that council may not have closely looked at Grey Sauble's watershed, because to assume that the Sauble River watershed is our only rural area, first off, if we use the term rural, our entire watershed's rural. We have urban centers, but so does every other watershed in the province. But if rural is meant to mean agricultural, then the Sauble watershed is only agricultural, really, truly in its south end, and the northern end is much more wooded and forested. And it would then ignore large parts of Chatsworth, Grey Highlands, Meaford, Town of the Blue Mountains, all of our, certainly the southern portion of our watershed is very agricultural based. It would cause huge service disruptions for the same reasons that I mentioned before, in terms of the fact that we do have a small staff of 28, and they are not only specialized, but specialized across multiple areas. And one side of our watershed would get those staff and the other side would not, so that doesn't work. There's a travel burden both to the public and to staff. So our office, which is currently in Georgian Bluffs, just south of Owen Sound, would be in the portion that's not part of the proposed region. And that would mean that people in the north part of the Sauble watershed would have to at closest drive to Formosa to see somebody. So not practical from that perspective. Huge issues with land ownership, liability, and public trust. So whereas a general consolidation, that land ownership is just merged into a single entity, by dividing the organization, that land ownership would actually have to be divested, and there's huge legal costs that would be associated with that for the amount of land that Great Sauble has. Disruption with drinking water source protection governance. So Carl talked a little bit to that during his discussion today, but if you actually severed that source protection region in parts, not along the same boundaries that they do right now, would also come with huge complications. It fails to recognize that Georgian Bay is actually part of Lake Huron. It's not separate from Lake Huron. It's a bay. It departs from the watershed-based boundaries because the proposal did come forward and say there are certain areas within some of the more southern watersheds where there's not enough of the actual watershed extending into another municipality to make it worthwhile. So we'll just crop the watershed at the municipal boundary, which again deviates from the science that makes watershed-based boundaries important and viable. It includes North Bruce Peninsula, which is not currently under a CA. I took the opportunity to speak to North Bruce Peninsula about this. They weren't happy. And the biggest thing is there was no consultation with anybody. So this wasn't discussed with us. And when it was circulated, they only circulated the municipalities within our watershed that would be within the new region, and neglected to circulate the municipalities within our watershed that would be left out of this region. So I did talk to staff at Huron-Kinloss about this, and they informed me that the point was to generate discussion. And I did note that you sent this to the minister. That's in our mind not the way to generate the discussion. So I did advise them that we would likely be sending a letter to their council expressing our concerns. So I've reached out and talked to several of the CAOs within our watershed leading up to what was going to be that special meeting, because I wanted to make sure that our CAOs were not blindsided by a request coming from our office. As I noted, I talked to the CAO up at North Bruce Peninsula, and she was going to be reaching out to Huron-Kinloss as well, because they're not part of a conservation authority, and I don't think they have any interest in being so. So the recommendation ultimately is to send the prepared letter that's in the package to Huron-Kinloss, and to send it to all the CCs on here, because regardless of what's proposed by the ministry right now, I think it's important that we do not leave this option on the table as an alternative, as a fallback should the province decide to make changes to the direction that they're going. This is not a viable option. So through you, Mr. Chair, I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Tim, for the presentation. Are there questions to the report? Member Winters?
Thank you. It's a great report, Tim. I totally support that 100%. I'm just hoping that when we send correspondence back to everybody that's been CC'd, we use appropriate email addresses. And I quickly go through that list that Huron-Kinloss has attached. There are at least 3 spelling errors. I don't know whether Georgia Bluffs clerk actually got one, South Bruce Peninsula or West Gray, based on what I see for the typing errors within their CCs. So again, I totally support you and thank you for that position.
And it sounds like Member Winters is pleased to move the recommendation within the report. I see a thumbs up, so that's been moved. Do I have a seconder? Member Day is so moved or seconded. Are there any further questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. It is 3:20. Do we want to take a 10-minute break till 3:30? I see some nodding. So let's recess till 3:30. to get back to the chambers for Caleb and John, just to be aware. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for the short recess. It is 3:27 or 3:37. Sorry, we're back, and the next item is the proposed future state of GSE Foundation programs, and I will pass it over to Tim to speak to this report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as has been previously reported to the board over the last year and a half or so, our foundation, the Gray Sauble Conservation Foundation, is in the process of winding down. They've extended that wind down into 2026 to allow for the maturity of GICs that they're currently holding. And after that, they will be completely wound down at the end of this year. So that leads us to need to make some decisions on both the ongoing programming of the foundation, as well as the distribution of the funds that the foundation will be transferring over to the authority. So again, the report that I've provided in the agenda package contains all of the details. And what I plan to do today with you is just go very high level over or provide a synopsis of the 4 primary program areas that the foundation has and the recommendations for moving forward. And you will notice in the draft motion in the agenda that some of the areas are left to the discretion of the board. We did talk to our staff team about the proposed changes overall. Any of the staff that have dealt with these programs, have been involved with these programs or been involved directly with the foundation, have been involved with those discussions. And once we prepared our draft report and our draft recommendations, we shared that with the foundation and had discussion with their executive as well about those to make sure that a couple of things. One, we didn't want to blindside them with anything. We wanted to give them an opportunity for input, and we wanted to facilitate that discussion. So we've done that now. We don't see perfectly eye to eye on everything, but I'll go through that a little bit. So the 4 program areas that the foundation was offering is the Earth Film Festival, which is a film screening that happens once a year. And it offers historically 2 screenings during the day for elementary school children and 1 screening at night for the general public. There's the Memorial Forest program, whereby Gray Sauble sells trees to individuals who have typically lost a loved one, and those trees are planted in a memorial forest, and a plaque is put on a larger sign. So there's not a plaque for each individual tree beside the tree, but rather you're contributing to a forest. There is the Earth Day hike, which, as the name suggests, is a hike that happens on or around Earth Day every year. And that is centralized solely in Meaford with the Georgian Bay Community School. And so not across the entire watershed. And finally, the Gray Sauble Conservation Foundation Environmental Education Awards. And this was a $2,000 award to 1 graduating student from a high school within Gray Sauble Conservation Authority's jurisdiction. as well as a $200 award to one student at each of the 7 high schools within Grace Sauble Conservation Authority's jurisdiction. So in terms of the recommendations moving forward, currently our education programming is running the environmental or the Earth Film Festival this year. They're not doing the evening part of the performance, and they've reimagined the program a little bit. So it will have, it's still obviously geared at elementary school students, but this year, instead of just screening a film for the students to see, the students are actually involved, or a subset of the students are actually involved in creating the films, working with a filmmaker and getting that experience. So what it does for those students is, for the broad base of students, it still provides some environmental education in terms of seeing an environmental film. But for a subset of those students, it provides some hands-on learning in terms of thinking deeper about these issues and then presenting those issues in the format of a film. So pending success this year and future funding for that program, we would recommend that that program carries on through our environmental education programming. The Memorial Forest Program is one that the foundation and the authority don't see perfectly eye to eye on. This is a very important program for the foundation, and they've certainly put a lot of their energy and their emotional energy and their actual energy into this project over the last several years. A couple of the challenges for us is that we're actually running out of space. The memorial forests that exist at Big Mud Lake, north of Wyerton, Greersville south of Meaford, and the Potawatomi just at our Jones Falls property just outside of Owen Sound within Georgian Bluffs are all almost at capacity. The ceremony that happens every year. So typically, like I said, we sell the trees and the trees get planted the following year, and then a plaque goes up the following year. But what also happens the following year is the foundation hosts a ceremony at the Arboretum where the families come, and it's kind of like a non-denominational service that's provided. That's, from a staff perspective, that's a little out of sync with the rest of the work that we do at the authority in terms of staff carrying this on into the future without that support from the foundation. So we've presented 3 different options that we'd like the board to consider and choose going forward. So the first would be to wind the program down effective immediately, and to take the money that sits in the Memorial Forest Fund that the foundation currently has and create a Memorial Forest Reserve once that money comes to Grace Sauble, and that money would be used for maintenance moving forward. So the signs will need to be maintained, the trails on the sites will need to be maintained into the future, and that money would go towards facilitating that. Option 2 would be to continue with the program until the existing sites are full, and then and through that also assess the feasibility of converting the agricultural land at Inglis Falls, which is a small piece of ag land that's sort of cropped off from, for use of language, severed off from any other ag fields, and convert that to a memorial forest. So there are things that we would have to consider with that in terms of, we would need a parking lot, and it's on an MTO highway. So would MTO give us permission to put a parking lot in there? It's within the Niagara Escarpment area. So there are things to be investigated there, but an option could be to investigate that. The monies would still go into a memorial forest reserve, and they would fund the creation of that memorial forest, and then any monies that are left over, in addition to monies that are generated through the program, would help with the ongoing maintenance of the program. Option number 3 is one that came out of discussion with one of the foundation members, and it's the idea of continuing the Memorial Forest Program again for 2026, but for future, reimagining what this program could look like. And one of the ideas being to decentralize the program so that there is no longer a specific memorial forest, and maybe the plaque sign is situated at Grace Sauble's administrative office, and trees are planted throughout Grace Sauble's properties in general, or some other variation of that course, with reimagining, we don't have the answer for that yet. What we don't want to put on the table as an option at this point is purchasing property for the purposes of creating new memorial forests, because we don't. Actively acquiring property is not something we're currently doing, and not something that we have financial resources to do. Some of the other thoughts that have come forward have been, what if the trees were planted on a partner's property, like a municipality or some other partner? My hesitation with that is that we don't have control long-term over what happens on those properties. And given that people are paying for a tree in memory of a loved one that's going to be planted, I really don't like the idea that something could happen, intentionally happen to those trees in the future, of which we would have no control over. So those are the three options presented in the report, but certainly if the board has other options they'd like us to consider, we can do that as well. For the Earth Day hike, the proposal is to cease this program in its current state, but that GSCA consider facilitating resources for other schools to participate. This is not something we would do right away because it's not built into our work plan for this year, but our education program, is offering other guided hikes throughout the watershed. And it is reasonable to think that we could provide schools with general resources that they could use to have their own Earth Day hikes. And whether they do that as a fundraiser to raise money for the school, whether there's a fee for that, those are all things that could be considered. But for the time being, the program as it stands, we would recommend winding that down. And finally, the Environmental Education Awards. So this program area was also very important to the foundation. It does not seem to align well with GSCA's mandate and funding model, where 45% of our revenues come from municipal levy, unless our municipalities direct us to be giving out that money. So one of the recommendations that came from foundation members is that the endowment fund that is currently in the foundation's name, and the intent is that it would go into Grace Sauble's name, generates interest annually, and that interest, or a portion of that interest, is paid out currently to the foundation, who gives it to Grace Sauble, but in the future to Grace Sauble, in the order of between $2,000 and $5,000 a year. Currently, that money goes towards sponsoring the Greybury's Children's Water Festival, the Forest Festival, and our Biomap program, which is a Category 3 program. Currently, that money does not go towards funding these these awards, rather. The recommendation, however, or the suggestion from foundation members, was that that money could go towards funding those awards. It would be important for the board to recognize, though, that it's a finite amount of money every year. So if it's going towards the awards, it's not going towards the Water Festival or the Forest Festival or Bio. The recommendation coming from staff is that the monies generated by that endowment annually would be split 50-50 between a contribution to the Water Festival and a contribution to the Forest Festival. Biomap funding would have to come from a municipal levy, and that would leave no revenues for these awards to continue. So in terms of funding recommendations, we understand that there's about $110,000 that will be transferred over to the authority, and those numbers we still need to finalize. Our recommendation is that $35,000 of that be earmarked to a Memorial Forest Reserve, which would go towards whichever option that the board chooses for the Memorial Forest. That $50,000 of that funding go towards GSCA's Youth Reserve to continue to fund and grow GSCA's environmental education program. The foundation has been funding a contribution to that program for the last 3 years. I believe it's in line with their previous funding to continue that. It's a very well-received program that we have going right now at Grace Sauble, and it's currently there's only $8,000 of that program is funded by levy. So the other funding does have to come in from grants, sponsorship, and ideally a bit of a cushion from this funding. It's recommended to earmark $25,000 to GSCA's admin building or another large project. And the reason for that would be to create a final and recognizable contribution from the foundation, so that whether it's the admin building or it's something else, that we can put something up in recognition of the foundation's contribution directly to that project as another legacy piece for the organization. And finally, as I mentioned, that the endowment fund be split 50-50 between the Water Festival and the Forest Festival. If deemed appropriate, though, the board could choose to carry on with the environmental awards with that money, but that would require that those festivals, GSCA's current contribution to those festivals is either from another source or not at all moving forward. So back to you, Mr. Chair, for any questions or comments.
Okay, so the recommendation in the report is somewhat open-ended, so there will certainly be some questions and comments. Member Day, you can start off, and then Member Farmer.
Thank you. I'm happy to have the opportunity to start. I feel like I will value hearing other people's opinions throughout this conversation to figure out the best moves forward. I just wanted to add two puzzle pieces, and this is as much in gratitude as it is in looking at what comes next. The Malcolm Kirk Award in particular is the $2,000 award that has gone to a graduating student moving on in conservation. And I do know that it has gone to students across our watershed. It hasn't always gone to a student in one particular region of our watershed. That award is very meaningful to the students with the age of, especially say OSCDI. Some of the awards that we give out at the end of students' time in high school, there's one in particular that we have to decide upon in the science department. I think this description includes need for financial aid and an interest in success in science. And that award has a value of $30. So awards and scholarships to students do not increase with inflation or loss of OSAP. So that $2,000 award is highly valued for both recognition and resume building and the financial contribution to help with the student success. So in good part, gratitude. The other piece of that puzzle with Malcolm Kirk is just noting that it keeps Malcolm Kirk's name being used as well. And if you're not familiar with Malcolm Kirk, he did wonderful work for the conservation authorities and land acquisition for other organizations as well. He played a role in getting Dorcas Bay protected, which then later became part of Bruce Peninsula National Park. So all across Grey Bruce, there are lands that, and some of them Grey Sauble conservation areas that Malcolm Kirk helped protect. So he's had an incredible legacy for land protection, as well as inspiring other people, like the folks at Haibu, to help get into that field as well. So you'll hear lots of great stuff about him. But I'll leave it open for conversation, and I think there's many positive and very whatever happens next, there are good legacies coming out of the existence of the foundation.
Okay, thanks for that background on the award. Member Day, Member Farmer next.
Thanks. Just to confirm first, can you hear me? My headphones died, so I had to switch some stuff out. Caleb's nodding and my screen's lit up, so that seems okay. I'm curious first on the point of the memorial forest. How many years worth of planting space do we have? Is that up now, or is that a 2027, 2028 issue? Through the chair.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I did inquire with our team about that. It sounds like we're pretty much there. So this year's trees will likely be capacity. It's infill at this point.
Through the chair, my thoughts on the Memorial Forest Program. I was trying to think of like what is the service that this does, and it allows people to memorialize, which is really important, and it also builds positive relationships with the GSCA and the GSA properties. It generated some revenue. I'm mindful though of the comments around staff time and focus of work. My inclination would have been, I think, to play it out while we still have space, and then reassess at that point, given how many other questions are up in the air for the GSCA currently. It's also, the GSCA is not the only memorial forest program. Owen Sound runs one. To the third option presented as well, Owen Sound just decided to move from a centralized kind of monument to instead have decentralized planting that doesn't even have plaques on, well, that no longer has plaques on individual trees, but makes public GIS map that lets people mark the location and also provide additional information on the website for the person being memorialized. So if the board's interested in that, it's not hard for GSCA staff to put together a layer of GIS mapping, I would assume, based on our expertise or their expertise. So I'm just mindful of the benefit versus cost and the service that's being provided. My preference, I think, for the memorial forest would be to fill up the space for this year, not do an event specifically, and then reassess depending on what things look like in the future. I'm curious about the recommendation to use $25,000 as a final large contribution from the foundation, and whether the foundation was interested in kind of a big ticket item like contributing to the administration building, or whether there was interest in playing out that amount of money over what could be 12 years worth of Malcolm Kirk awards. And so I'd like to know if there was more information there. And I'll stop with that question before I go on to others. Through the chair to whoever can speak to it.
I'll pass that to Tim to speak to some of those comments.
Sure. Thank you very much, Member Farmer. In terms of I think we already answered the Memorial Forest one, so I won't go on that one again. In terms of the $25,000, we put it in there because we thought that it would be a nice piece for the foundation. It would essentially come from what's called their Conservation Projects Fund. So the intention of that fund was to fund these types of projects. And then it would give good rationale for saying, generously contributed or provided by the foundation. They've done a lot over the years, though. There was no feedback from the foundation on that particular item, so I can't speak on their behalf or if they'd rather see that money redirected elsewhere, but we could certainly bring that question back to them.
Thank you. I think when I think about what is not core funding that is also really important and good work, funding the two education-focused festivals with the ongoing money, I think makes a lot of sense. I also think that it makes a lot of sense to preserve the Malcolm Kirk scholarship for as long as possible, knowing that it is in the interests of this type of work to make sure that we are planting scientists and advocates who value collaborative science and data-informed management of watersheds, and that we, for all of the public awareness that we do generally, that supporting the people who are going to be the future champions and of this work in their professional lives, I think is really important. And yeah, so my inclination would be to reassess whether a large ticket contribution to a capital project that we've already figured out a budget for is the best use of that, if it's also possible to extend the Malcolm Kirk Award by a little over a decade while still preserving the annual contributions to those other festivals.
Okay, thanks for that. I'll go to Member Yurg, then Member Hall next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of things. Selfishly, the Meaford Earth Day hike obviously said to consider that might be going away. I would like to know how much kind of was that more laborious or was that financial? I'd like to know, so because we could approach GBCS and talk about alternatives. They could try and potentially get other kind of sponsorships or something. So I'd like to know just what kind of went into that in a little more detail. Doesn't have to happen here, but that could be a side. If you let me know that later, that would be great. Regarding the Memorial Forest program, again, so all the conversations we're having are very good, and I love long-term thinking. Of course, the very large elephant in the room is this ridiculous amalgamation. So for us to consider doing something in 27, while the government is saying that CA's offices will now continue their legislative requirements, these are beyond legislative requirements. These are nice to haves, not have to haves. So are we making a decision that in February 27, a larger body is going to say, no, we're not spending that money there because we no longer have that autonomy? So your point 3 about continuing it for 26 and then see what happens in 27. Yeah, we can say that would be a nice to have, but I just don't know how much control we'll have it. So that concerns me. And do other CAs mirror the memorial forest concept? And if that's the case, is that the argument for the larger body to say, yeah, let's continue that kind of throughout the whole area? Or is this going to be like a bunch of people saying, yeah, that's great, you guys did that, but yeah, well, Sarnia is not concerned, or I mean, Lake Simcoe is not concerned about that so much, about doing a memorial forest here. So that's my concern about carrying it further beyond promises we can't keep, potentially.
Go to Tim and then to Member Hall.
Thank you, Member Yuri. I agree. We don't have those answers. We don't know what the future holds with the changes that are coming. What I would suggest, though, is that a decision that the board makes now holds more weight than no decision being made at all. So if there's no decision being made on the program or the funding, I think we can almost guarantee that it doesn't exist in the future. Versus if there's a direction from this board now to do it, we can't guarantee that it exists in the future, but it certainly has more likelihood than otherwise.
Member Hall, go ahead.
Thanks. With just discussion on these individualized grants, these are the things that bring us our local identity and the things that can make our conservation authority ours. And when we're talking about losing that identity through merging, I think it's pretty important to maintain some of these grants and show the general public why we exist. When it comes down to memorial forest, our municipality is actually just starting memorial tree programs, and would love to have the assistance from the Conservation Authority to host those types of memorial forests on municipal properties. So I would certainly be in favor of that going forward. And the loss of hikes, that's a great way of people engaging nature with well, not being kind of preached to about all the watershed things that you do. And I think that teaming up with the Peninsula Hiking Festival, I see that we actually didn't have a hike on our property during the Peninsula Hiking Festival, and that might be one way that we merge into something that is bigger brand and less labor intensive for staff, engaging with schools and things like that. So those are my comments, but I think our municipality would be in support of hosting a memorial forest if that's the direction of the board.
Thanks, Member Hall. Go to Member Mackey next.
Thanks, Chair Greg. I guess I'm thinking back to our foundation members, and the last time they were here, they spoke about the importance of the Memorial Forest Program and wanting, that was the one wish, that it would continue. And there were a couple of members of the foundation that were willing to volunteer. I understood anyways, going forward with that program. So I don't think we should give that one up at this point. I certainly recognize what Member Urick is saying in regards to that commitment may not last beyond 2027, but for this board, in honor of all those representatives that spend so much time with the foundation, and that was their request, so I'd like to see us honor that request. Thanks.
Okay. Member Maxwell.
Thank you very much. I echo that comment on the memorial forest in cooperation or concert or whatever with the municipalities. I don't know if you do it through an MOU or whatever, but I could certainly see it happening in the town of Blue Mountains because we're currently are involved in memorial forest right now, and having the conservation authority involved would certainly be beneficial to us.
Not seeing any. Well, I'll go to Member Shaw before I do share some comments of my own.
Thank you through the chair. So I mean, I think this is it's a difficult thing because I think ideally we would like to continue everything and also recognize that a lot of the work was being done by volunteers and with significant staff support, and the capacity in our mandate maybe doesn't make sense to continue all of it. Member Farmer asked the question I had, just how many years of space were even left. And so I think with that question being answered, I would lean towards, this being the final year of it, and we see where things land after this year. I like this idea of number 3, like something that is a little bit decentralized, but again, I don't think that that's something that maybe today we undertake, just given it's not in the work plan for today and just with so much uncertainty ahead. I certainly think that converting land into a new forest is also not feasible. I don't think at this point. As for the awards, I guess I not really knowing the history, I really appreciated that member day because I do like that idea of continuing to invest in these future champions. Also strongly believe in the Forest Festival and the Water Festival and seeding that interest in our young people early on, and the number that are impacted by that is significant. So if I would have to choose, I think I would lean towards making sure that we continue to support the Water Festival and the Forest Festival because those do align with our educational programming. But always hate to cut a scholarship out because I think, as been mentioned, that is super impactful for those individuals that receive it, and we do need those young people to go on and pursue education in this field. So I was trying to think, is there other organizations? And I don't have that expertise and know what the scholarship landscape looks like today. And it's been a few years since I've had to explore that myself. So I think for me, it comes down to, when those funds were invested with the foundation in honor of Malcolm Kirk, was there stipulation set around that? Was there, were there strings tied to those funds that would prohibit us, I guess, from ending that scholarship? And if not, is there another opportunity we can kind of transfer that recognition for that individual into something else so that, as has been said, the name lives on in the community? So I don't know, Tim, if you have that history or no, but that would be my question.
Thank you for that. In terms of the fund, so the endowment fund, there's no strings attached in terms of it funding the awards, because currently it doesn't fund the awards. So that's money that was intended to come to Grace Sauble in perpetuity as the interest to continue to help fund programs and projects of the authority.
Okay, thanks for the comments. I just have, I'll go to Member Dubik. She hasn't spoken yet before I share my concerns.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to add sort of my bit of voting power in terms of what I'm thinking. So with regards to the memorial forest, so as long as it's self-funding and staff time is minimal, I would continue to support the idea of prolonging that program in a decentralized planning approach. I think we've heard that there are lands available, maybe in different areas. If some sort of agreement could come about, I would be supportive of that. With regards to item D, so the conservation awards. So given the fact that we are supporting already those two festivals, I think we continue to do that. And I would support Member Farmer's idea of earmarking that $25,000 project, and wondering, if we could move back with the foundation board and ask, would doing, another 12 years of this sponsorship, $2,000 sponsorship, be a good way of spending those $25,000. Thank you.
So a few thoughts I have is, having been at the memorial forest ceremony a few times, it is on a weekend. I would be extremely cognizant of your ask. As hard as the decision might be today, I'd be extremely considerate of the ask, which you're now making on staff, to work a weekend. It's not part of their general routine, and I think that's a little over and above the normalcy of the operation. It was much easier to be able to execute the event when it is volunteer driven, but I think your conversation is entirely different when you're now asking to draw upon staffing resources who may have other commitments. I certainly enjoyed the comments about the memorial forest, the background of that Member Farmer gave about what we do in Owen Sound. I think about the loss of trees on our slopes within our hazard lands. Hazard lands does have somewhat of a mechanism of effectively protecting trees just from being cut down. So I have some interest if there was possibilities, and I don't want to just center Owen Sound out, because we have lots of slopes that require tree planting and robust, strong trees, not just weak ones that don't function long term. But perhaps there is an opportunity moving forward with as Member Farmer was speaking about GIS and mapping potential to support tree planting initiatives, whether it's in South Bruce, like Member Hall mentioned, or in Owen Sound, or in any of our municipalities that might consider such a thing, that are a benefit to the environment. But I do think the execution of a specific event on a weekend is getting much more difficult now when you're leaning on staff. The $25,000, probably historically more of a fan of investing into capital requirements. It's in the report, the admin building, but I wonder, we just had lots of information about brazil ice and flooding possibilities in the Beaver River in Thornbury, Eugenia Falls. We just had a master plan done a couple of years ago, and it's often been said, do we lack investing to some of the participating municipalities to the east? So are there events, or are there capital investments that we could make at Clendenning Dam that are in need, or Eugenia Falls that sees excellent foot traffic a year, that we can elevate the profile of that property with an investment there, and be thinking even outside of just the admin building here in Owen Sound, because we do seem to be somewhat centric, I think, on the admin center or right in Owen Sound, and there may not be, but I wonder if there might be opportunities. I know in our business, some years many people might get $1,000 throughout the year. Some other years more people get $500 allotments, or many more get $250 allotments. it's $2,000 now for the one award, but can the monies from that endowment fund just be split a little bit more just to benefit the water festival, forest festival, and still make a contribution to support the endowments? So it might not be the 2,000, but I think someone would be pretty grateful too if it was 1,000 or a smaller denomination, as opposed to just business as usual. I guess those are my key thoughts, but certainly just thinking of staff time required, that's the tremendous value that the foundation brought to the Conservation Authority, was the work that they did. But to lose that and just throw it all now on Tim and into incorporating into his work plan and finding resources, I think is a difficult ask to do. So I do have an open-ended recommendation at this time. So if someone wants to fill in some blanks and move forward, I'll go to member Day first.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. It was helpful to listen to different thoughts and maybe build on some and go from there, and maybe provide a little bit more context as well. The foundation was involved in projects as well, and that reserve was for projects. And just as a reminder, I feel like one of the last projects was a boardwalk at Inglis Falls, which had the added benefit of being a partnership with a military organization. Someone can add a detail in there where the actual construction was provided by some other folks. So there was a good partnership there, and it really benefited the visitors to Inglis Falls. And that I do like to remember, or Chair Greg's comment about the possibility of supporting another part of the watershed through a project. You mentioned Clendem and Dam, but there's all sorts of possibilities in there. I just also wanted to add that there is name recognition along with the Grey Sauble Conservation Foundation Award that was given out in the past. I found that the vast majority of the time, those award winners, their families, the schools interpreted that scholarship or award, more technically speaking, as coming from the Conservation Authority and not the foundation. The Conservation Authority itself had more name recognition. So over the years, we've already been the recipients of a lot of gratitude from the students and families and schools. And for the Memorial Forest, I would support I'm not sure about this year if volunteers are still at capacity and willing to help offer the ceremony, but I think the Memorial Forest, if it does exist in the future, could exist without an annual ceremony, but do recognize the need to have staffing to sell the trees, to receive donations, to communicate with family members of current and past honorees of those trees. So there is that background work that would go into managing a forest. And I think whenever we memorialize people, we need to very intentionally do so in a long lasting way to make sure it's sustainable and those trees are protected. I also wanted to, I would be interested in the foundation's thoughts about the project money versus using that money to support youth in some way, to hear their opinions on that. But I'll stop now.
Okay, thanks for those comments. Just going to go to CAO Lantier.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank everybody for their thoughtfulness and your contributions to this discussion. And we're sort of taking it all in and realizing as I hear everything that we may want to, go back and rethink some of these things as well. But one of the things that just came to mind regarding the Memorial Forest project is, like I said, our Memorial Forest properties are pretty much at capacity. We can't buy new properties. We do have some agricultural properties, but otherwise our properties are largely treed. I am hearing from some of you that the municipalities may have properties, and certainly we could look to what an agreement around that would look like. Without getting too much in the weeds, I think we might even want something on title if we went down that road, just because, like I said, we are securing these forests in honor of people's loved ones, and I'd hate for that something to happen to those forests in the future. But as I'm hearing everybody talk, and really the focus is largely on the memorial forest and the awards, which was also the concern from the foundation, I'm starting to put my mind towards, could these two feed off each other? So the memorial forest currently generates, I think, about $6,000 a year, but the ceremony that's run costs $5,000 or $6,000 a year. And so that money is lost to that ceremony. And I mean, I use the term lost loosely. I don't mean that it's not important. I just mean that's where it goes. There could be a future iteration of this where we continue to sell memorial trees. We partner with our municipal partners to plant these trees, and the revenues that come from that go to support environmental awards that go to students. And therefore, it's sort of a self-fulfilling legacy of the foundation, whereby we get to keep both of the programs that are very important for them, and the one actually funds the other.
Well, just before I go to Member Farmer, Member Mackey suggests that's a good idea. He likes it. It might be something that, would you move just postponing this to the April meeting, and CAO Lanthier can further report back a little more extensively on it? And if so, I see it seconded by Member Dubik. I'll go to you, Member Mackey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would defer this matter until the next meeting to allow our CEO to come back with more specifics on the wonderful plan that he just divulged to us. Thanks.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. So it's the deferral that is on the floor right now for discussion. Councillor Farmer, your question is pertinent to then the deferral?
Yes, and partly because I was going to move part of the motion. It strikes me that we've heard kind of broad agreement around the original motions, items A and C, to continue the film festival as part of the environmental programming and to cease the Earth Day hike program in its current format. I'm wondering if there's any benefit to moving what sound like the non-controversial parts of the motion in the agenda and deferring the subsequent motions just to move it ahead. Or if it's all the same to staff, I'm happy to support the deferral as in total as well.
Okay, thanks, Member Farmer. I think we can defer the whole report, and we will place it back on the agenda for April. Member Day.
Also deferral related, schools are working with old information. So if we defer, can we arrange for information to be sent to the schools? Just maybe asking students to hold off of applying. I just wouldn't want to see students put the effort into applying for an award that no longer exists when they're under pressure at the end of their grade 12 year.
And I don't think we can have a response, but Member Lanthier's noted that concern. So yeah, we can follow up. Member Maxwell on the deferral.
Yes, but I just wanted to see if I can build on a comment you personally had said earlier. Can I do that?
If it's on the deferral only.
Okay. So it pertains to Clendenin's Dam area, which you mentioned earlier. So I'm just wondering, a memorial forest, can it be on a existing trail network to add connectivity to green space in throughout conservation lands? They say from Clendenin's Dam down to the Georgian Trail?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I think any specifics we'd want to take some time to look at. I don't think there's any area on the Clendenin property to plant trees in this amount. The only open area is the spillway for the dam. So I think that's something that we could work with the staff team at the various municipalities to see if there are places.
Okay, we've had discussion. It's 4:20. I'm just going to call the vote. We still have material ahead of us this afternoon. All those in favor of deferring this report? Any opposed? Not seeing any. That's carried. Thank you very much. And at this time, the last report before us, we'll welcome Mac to the meeting this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This report that I'm bringing forward, sorry, is essentially an update to a report that I brought forward at last month's board meeting. So for those who weren't here, and just a quick summary, last month I presented about the year-over-year directives from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to freeze Conservation Authority planning and permitting fees. And that was dating back to January 1st of 2023. The directive from the minister expired on December 31st, 2025. And with that, a recommendation was brought forward to the board to make an inflation-based adjustment to the planning and permitting fee schedule for 2026. That was approved by the board. And then just to update though, the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks did issue a new directive to conservation authorities to freeze planning and permitting fees. But that directive was issued March 10th and effective March 10th. And it goes till February 28th, 2027. So with that, there's no impact to the fee schedules in that aspect. They were approved in February, and so there's no need to claw them back. I'm just bringing this to the board for information that a new directive was issued to freeze fees. Within that same report, there was a couple recommendations to make some administrative updates to the fee schedule, both on the planning and permitting side. We've had another look at our fee schedule and realized there's another administrative adjustment we'd like to make to the permitting side of the fee schedule. And that would be to move shore wells into the exemption category. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the shore well, it's essentially a concrete casing that's approximately a 1 meter diameter plus or minus around. It goes into the ground and then has a pipe that extends out into the water source. We currently do exempt water lines, newer replacement lines, so long as it's not through a water course, wetland or steep slope. Shore wells, though, we've been issuing permits for them and they've been within the routine category. So there's kind of a conflict there. You know, what we see is shore wells, especially what we've been seeing lately, they're on the shoreline of Georgian Bay, and in some cases like Huron, but predominantly Georgian Bay. The Minister of Natural Resources, who administered Public Lands Act, where these shore wells commonly fall, don't actually require permits for these installations. From our own perspective, when we're looking at them from a natural hazard lens, it's a very low risk type of activity. It's usually a straightforward permitting process with the landowner. But what we've also been seeing is that as the lake levels have been fluctuating, and more recently with water levels dropping, we're seeing wells run dry. So those can be, you know, an emergency situation where that is the primary source of water for the landowner, and they want to get that addressed immediately. And needing to come to us for a permit can affect the timing of the landowner's ability to access water. So those three reasons are why we want to move it into an exemption category. We're estimating that we would lose about $2,000 to $2,500 in revenue from the permit fees that would come with that application. That's just based on, you know, last year we saw 8 shore well permits issued exclusively just for shore wells, and the year before that we saw 3. So there is a little bit of a range, but I expect with the water levels dropping and that trend continuing, we're probably going to see more emergency types of works for shore wells. So we don't want to be a barrier to landowners accessing water. So that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them.
Thank you, Mac. And it's been shocking to me walking over the 8th Street Bridge in the mornings and the afternoons, how quickly the river level has dropped already after just a couple of weeks removed from the Snow Mountain rains. Looking for, actually, first I'll entertain a mover of the motion that the Board of Directors approve an administrative update to the 2026 permit fee schedule. So moved by Member Dubik, seconded by Member Day. Is there any questions to Mac regarding the report and the schedule? Member Dubik.
Yeah, so no question, but I think, just a quick comment of, well done, for your quick and decisive action to update the fee schedule to reflect the inflationary pressures.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mac. Not seeing any other questions. All those in favor of the recommendation? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks, Mac. So we are through our business items down to item 9, CAO's report. Back over to Tim.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the things that I've been busy with over the last month are largely covered in this report already, or in the package already, so I won't go over those again. But one of the things that I did want to bring up is we did have some flooding this spring. Obviously, we had quite a bit of snow again this winter, and a lot of snowpack was left on the landscape this spring when very warm weather came upon us and heavy rain. So the spring's freshet was higher than we've seen for several years. The significant snowpack combined with the warm weather and the heavy rain resulted in a quick rise to the water levels in our streams, which I'm sure you all experienced either directly or through your staff. It did happen over a weekend, which seems to be par for the course that it has to happen on a weekend. And our team did put in a lot of hours to make sure that they were staying on top of things. And Ian noted for me that that thankfully it peaked during the daytime hours. But our team does trade off with each other to keep an eye on things overnight as well when this happens. A second melt and rain event did happen as well, but it wasn't quite as high as the first. So most of our water courses peaked at between a 10 and 25-year event level, which is quite high. The Mill Creek in the Beaver Valley reported levels twice in a week that exceeded what we have on record for the past 20 years in terms of flows. We saw some roadway flooding, which again, I'm sure you heard about through your municipalities, but it does seem to have been the usual suspects of the places that, your road staff know where these areas are, and it's not unusual for them to flood. One area that we did see flooding that we haven't seen it for several years is Meaford Harbor, where the ice breakup caused ice jamming and caused the water levels to top the corner. So if you're familiar with Meaford Harbor, it makes a 90-degree bend before it heads under Trowbridge Street and out to the bay. And sometimes when the river's disgruntled, it jumps over that 90-degree bend, and it did that this spring. And there are some houses there that it would have been pretty stressful for those homeowners, I'm sure. However, we did have great communication with our municipality. So Ian and John and the team did a great job of providing updates to both the public and to our municipal partners. And our municipal partners were getting back to us with what they were seeing in the problem areas. And it's really, really great for us to have that two-way communication so that we can let them know what's coming and they can let us know what's happening on the ground. And so that we can move from a watershed statement to a warning to a watch as that becomes necessary. So a busy spring. Ian is taking over the program from John Bidorf as John prepares to retire. And although Ian may not see it this way, I think it's made for a good learning opportunity to to have these things happen between the frazzle ice this winter and then this heavy flow this spring. You have to see it sometime, I guess. The only other thing I wanted to touch on for the board is that in our efforts to be proactive in meeting with partner groups and building our partner groups and meeting with the community, Mac and his team and myself met with the Grey Bruce Home Builders Association last night in an event that they were having, and we went to the event prior to their dinner and presented to the group. So it was a smaller group than we thought it was going to be, but it went really well. We discussed planning and permitting items, what we do, why we do it, as well as the proposed changes to the legislation. And it was good to get the dialogue going and get that door open. And we look forward to future collaborations with the group. So we were open to hearing, you know, what's working and what's not working and how we can work better together. And they were really open to hearing where we're coming from. So really positive all around, and we'll keep moving in that direction. That's it from me, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And are there any questions? Member Urick, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sure Mr. Bell will echo. Just wanted to really thank GSTA staff. Yes, we did have the flooding at the harbor, and it always, of course, happened on a weekend, and our staff, we already thanked them for the work they did. But yeah, the messaging that was coming through from GSTA was great. We did have lots of advance warning and assistance from that regard. We just wanted to thank the staff for their efforts.
Well said. And not seeing any further questions, and it is 4:32, so I'm cognizant that we don't want to see Member Hall locked inside the old town hall there in Wyerton. We'll keep moving through. I've got one item within the my chair's report, and I was joined this past Saturday in Elmwood by Member Maxwell, Member Mackey, Member Winters was there. Am I missing anyone? But there was a presentation, a couple presentations actually, by Tina Shankula, who is a farm policy analyst with the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, and the general manager for Saugeen Conservation, Eric Downing. Just touching upon a few items of concern, and I'm just going to read off for those that weren't able to make it. The OFA had a pretty good proposal that they had put into the provincial government, and just in bold terms, their response provided agricultural and rural communities are meaningfully represented and local expertise is retained. The OFA supports system reform and consolidation that improves fairness and predictability and efficiency for landowners, consistent, transparent permitting across Ontario, reducing red tape through a one-window permitting approach. Their key concerns were overly large regional boundaries, loss of local knowledge, governance gaps, regional boundaries. They had proposed changes that were aligned with source water delivery models. Certainly had concerns with the loss of agricultural representation on CA boards. So anyway, some good comments from Tina to the members or to the participants in the agricultural day that day, as well as General Manager Eric Downing. So not sure if anybody has any questions, but I think yeah, a valuable contribution that the OFA had at least submitted to the province as part of the ERO posting. So we are through our main part of our agenda. We do have a closed session this afternoon. Just going to flip screens here briefly. And note that the Great Sauble Conservation Authority Board of Directors proceed into closed session at, where's all the clocks? 4:34 p.m. to discuss matters related to the following: 1, minutes of the closed session of the regular Board of Directors meeting held on January 28, 2026, and 2, a legal item closed as it relates to the receiving of advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. And that's from GSE Admin Bylaw Section 4, bunch of Roman numerals. And 3, a human resource item closed as it relates to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including authority directors or authority employees. And further, that CAO Tim Lanthe and Admin Assistant Valerie Coleman will be present, and Manager of Environmental Planning McLean Plews will be present for items 1 and 2 only. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Member Urick, seconded by Member Winters. All those in favor? And that's carried. So